All right, thank you very much for the introduction here, and let's get started because we do, now, don't need to see my car. Bambi and I had a disagreement. I think I won, but it's costly. All right, but we do have a somewhat limited time frame we're trying to run in here with a lot to cover because I hopefully want to get as many of these demos out of the way as I can before the pizza shows up and I lose your attention. All right. So we're going to try to talk about Ink in 60 seconds, little simple examples of how easy it is to build tablet applications and how you could be doing this already today if you had the right environment. If you know .NET, I assume you all at least know some .NET or you wouldn't be here. If you know .NET, you're already ready to write tablet applications. You just don't know it yet. So, my quick little bio slide, blah, 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 blah. A lot of you have seen it already. A lot of you have seen me around. Most important part, right there. Martin@tabletuml.com. If there's a question that comes up that I don't think to cover tonight, that you don't think about it till next week, never hesitate, Martin@tabletuml.com. Make sure the subject line of your message says something like saw you at AAD&D or something like that. I filter my spam manually. And so I just need to see in the subject that you're not trying to sell me Viagra or a Rolex or a timeshare or something, and you'll get through. Our agenda. And I just don't think we can possibly do all of these demos before the pizza arrives, but I'm going to do an amazing number of them and show you examples of the tablet PC in action. And after I show you each one, then I'll try to explain to you what I did. But first I'll write the code and have it working in, theoretically, under 60 seconds each. Feel free to laugh at me when I miss. On the other hand, give me credit that some of them I'll get done in a lot less than 60 seconds. Because partly I'm going to cheat. I did a whole lot of setup work in advance. I'm going to have each demo build on the ones that came before it, so I don't have to write a whole lot of new code. It's not going to be nice or pretty or commented. Don't do as I'm doing, but understand what I'm doing and see how easy it is to apply it. And with that, we're going to start our first demo, 60 seconds to ink. As I said, I'm going to go launch my little egg timer. So I now have 60 seconds to get this application or this demo up and running. So of course my machine has to slow down on me. Thank you, machine, you just like to see me get laughed at. All right. And come on, now my double click isn't working. Stop. I am done. There, see? And you say, wait a minute, you didn't even write any code. That's right, I didn't. And yet, I hit the go button. And I'm drawing ink. Because Microsoft said, how do we make it as easy as possible to get you drawing ink in your applications? The real mechanism that collects this ink is an underlying object called an ink collector object. But they decided, you know, yes, we've given you all this ink collector API. Why don't we give you, though, a class, a component called ink picture, which inherits from PictureBox, which many of you have already used in your .NET Forms applications, and has the ink collector already attached to it. So it's literally zero code to have somebody able to draw pictures in your application. You drop a picture box on a form and you're gathering ink. Whereas up here, I'm not gathering ink. Down here, I'm gathering ink inside of that picture box. So, basically a picture box with an ink collector attached to it and therefore some properties of that ink collector. And actually, I'll be a little bit more precise. It's an ink overlay, which is a subclass of ink collector that adds some extra stuff. So we've got some properties that describe what tablet it's attached to. Renderer, we'll talk about renderer. It's the thing that lets us translate between ink space and pixel space. Because ink space is actually a much higher coordinate space, much more precise coordinate space than pixels. For those of you who've had to do your own graphics work in Windows, going back to whatever, it's the high metric space, which I always forget what one unit is, whether it's hundredth of a centimeter or something like that. It's some really, really tiny amount. Ink is the object that your strokes get collected into. It's the basic fundamental unit of ink data, made up of stroke objects, which we'll see coming up in a later demo. Ink enabled just has to be turned to true to say I'm collecting this, and by default with the picture box it is true. Collection mode has to do with, are we drawing lines or are we drawing shapes that we recognize as some sort of command? And we'll see examples of that coming up later. And we've got a third mode, which is ink and gesture. Ink, you're drawing strokes. Gesture, you're making shapes that are commands. Ink and gesture is a combination of the two. All right, so there's my first demo, and I had it done in under 15 seconds, I would say. So you got to give me some slack when I get into some of the later ones here. Such as Ink Anywhere. And this one I can still do fairly quickly. Let me start my timer. Come on, start. All right, it started. Let me go give myself another tab to work on here. Drop a great big button up here. Give myself a great big button. Give myself a handler for the form, for the load. Come up here and say, what I need now is I need an ink collector. And they say, oh, we don't have one of those yet. We don't know what that is. And I say, well, using Microsoft.ink, the namespace it's in, we'll call it COLL. Starts out equal to null. Here, in the form load, I say COLL equals a new ink collector with that button as its source. And col.enabled equals true. And I come down here and, barely in time, catch my clock. There are those who say that I cheat when I run this demo because I don't actually check that the code compiles before I stop the clock. You know, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to take every advantage I can get. Okay, so we have our original ink picture here I can draw on. We have our frame up here I can't. Have area here I can't. But now I can draw on that button. So that's really all they did with the ink picture, is they attached a collector, or in their case an overlay, and attached to it. You say, why in the world do I want to draw on a button? Well, realize, this came first. The ink picture came later. They had to build this functionality first of you can draw on some surface. And that's part of some window. And then they said, now let's wrap it up into a handy class. Now I can give you some examples where this could still be useful. Imagine, say, you've got a great big long document that you're scrolling through with a scroll bar. You've got a place you want to remember where it was. If you could draw on the scroll bar and scratch just a little bookmark there, then you can remember where to drag the thumb back to. So that could be one example where you might want to have ink anywhere, not just ink on an ink picture. All right, so let's go back and look at what we have there. Most important property of the ink collector is what control it's attached to, obviously. Again, we've got our tablet, our renderer, our ink. We've got our ink enabled. Actually, it should not be called ink enabled. It should be called enabled. I blew it on this slide. It's called ink enabled on the ink picture, but it's called enable on the ink collector. Why? Because the ink picture is a Windows Forms control, which already has an enabled property. So they had to come up with another property to hold the enabled value of the ink. Again, our collection mode, two other things, auto redraw and dynamic rendering. Auto redraw means that any time you redraw the control, they automatically redraw the ink on top of the control. Dynamic rendering makes sure that you see it as you're drawing it. You can imagine that sometimes maybe you want to be able to do some work that you don't want to see yet. You're just drawing some stuff along the way. I don't see very many cases at all where I turn that to false, but you can see the capability might be useful in rare cases. They've provided it for you. All right. Programmatic ink. I'm going to create ink now without the pen. So, I am going to go back to my form, go up to my menu, add a command, add ink. And I double click that, and I say, all right, point array PTS equals a new point array consisting of a new point from 0, 0 and a new point of 1000, 1000. And I come down here and I say ink picture 1 dot ink dot create stroke, and I pass it my points array, and I say ink picture 1 dot refresh.
Did you take a nap or what?
Did you take a nap or what? I was close. I was within a second. And I hit the button. I go up to my menu, add ink, and bingo, I've just created a new stroke object as part of that ink. Notice what I talked about in terms of the coordinate space. That's 1,000 ink units. It's a very tiny coordinate space compared to pixel space. And so it's not necessarily intuitive just how big you have to get to draw something a particular size on the screen. In general, I've learned I don't try to guess. That's part of what the renderer is for. If I want something that is 500 pixels by 500 pixels, as we'll see coming up, the renderer class will tell me, well, in ink space, that would be equivalent to this big of a space. All right. So what I did there was I did this create stroke to create a new stroke object. Now, two terms that have to be kept straight, and I will try really hard to keep them straight, and I'll probably confuse yourself and me as well. We have stroke, and we have strokes. The plural of stroke is not strokes. The plural of stroke, train yourself in this if you're going to be programming on the tablet, is stroke objects. Because strokes is a collection of stroke objects. And so therefore, in common usage, if you say, well, I drew 3 strokes, you get confusion between the 3 stroke objects and a collection that may contain those. Because a strokes collection can contain various stroke objects, but a given stroke object can be contained by multiple strokes collections. So you want to think of the stroke object separate from the strokes it might be collected by. The stroke has default drawing attributes. We'll be talking about drawing attributes coming up. It's color and shape and so on. All right. So that was a quickie example of programmatic ink. So now you can see how, for instance, in my tablet UML tool, you go and draw a kind of squarish thing, and I replace it with a nice clean square. Because I just go out and say, okay, I write a formula for creating a stroke that consists of the points that bound a square. Saving ink. All right, this one's going to be a little trickier. See if I can do this one in 60 seconds. Start up my clock. Go up here. Call it save. Oh, no, I don't want that. Oh, well, my menu got the wrong name. I'm coming down here because I don't have the time to spare. All right, I say byte array, bytes, equals inkpicture1 dot ink dot save. And then file dot write all bytes to, remember the c:/aadnd dot isf, comma, bytes. Why doesn't it like that? Oh, because I got a spare quotation mark in there. And all right, so I got it done. I still had to fix one minor glitch there, but it should now compile. All right, it compiles and it runs, and I can go and draw something. I can come up to here and I can click save, and it's saved. Oh wait, that didn't help you much. It didn't prove that I actually saved anything. Okay, so I need to load it, right? Well, no, that's my next 60-second demo. I cheated. I broke save and load up into 2. There was no way I was going to do them both in 60 seconds. So instead, let me change my code just a little bit so that you can see that I really did do what I said I did. So let me come up with another version of this. That will be the original one. But this one we're going to call it GIF instead of .isf. And over here under Save, we're going to say that I want this to be persistence format GIF. And I go and draw more stuff. And I go and hit the Save button. And I come out to my Windows Explorer. Go to my computer, C:, and there's aadmd.gif. And sure enough, there it is. So I actually did save in the 60 seconds. I just didn't save in a format that I could prove to you that I saved it. It was out there, right there, aadmd.isf, but it wasn't a format I could show you yet.
I have a question.
Sure.
You can save either in its default format or any image format, right?
No. As the API works today, you can save in its format or GIF format.
Okay.
Now, and we'll talk about this when we get to the renderer, that one of the things you can do with the renderer is render the ink onto an image, which you can then save in any standard Windows format. But the ink itself only knows how to save in two formats. ISF, short for ink serialized format, or GIF. Now, when they save in GIF, they're also doing something cool that I cannot possibly demonstrate in 60 seconds. But the GIF format, some of you may know already, is an extensible format. They built an extension into the GIF format such that the ink strokes behind the scenes, the ISF information, is saved as part of the GIF. So if you hand that GIF to somebody who has a tablet and an application built to pull that information back out, you've got the original ink strokes, not just the GIF. You hand it to somebody who doesn't have a tablet, okay, they've got a GIF. So in fact, on that question of formats, there's really four formats they have. Persistence format, .ink serialized format, which is the default, .gif, and then base 64 ink serialized and base 64 GIF. So if you've got something that has to go across a web page or HTTP or something like that and has to be in a character format, yes, we can all do our own base 64 encode or call a base 64 encoding library if we want to. They've simply given us one that's just built in automatically, so that we don't have to think about that if we just want HTTP transport. All right, so now let me go back to this version. So it's back to saving it as ISF. Oh, and if I'm going to go back to this version, I need to go back to the original persistence format. So that's where we started to do our save. And looking back at our slide, talks about using save to a byte array, the persistence format. In addition, they provide some compression formats that we can give default, which is no compression, or we can say no compression to explicitly or maximum. They don't give a lot of options there, but they give some compression capabilities there. All right, if I did 60 seconds for saving ink, of course, the next thing has to be 60 seconds for loading ink. So let us go back here, get to my form, start up my clock, come back here, give myself a load option. Come on. I don't seem to be able to double-click my pen tonight. Something's wrong, and I don't know what it is. So I'll double-click with the plain old mouse. All right. So I copy some code here and say that I want to do file.readAllBytes. Takes as parameters the same path. Equals. We say this is a byte array bytes. And we say inkpicture1.ink.load those bytes. And I come down here and I stopped. Sometimes even there I miss it and it doesn't stop, and then it insults me when I succeeded. All right, and you say, well, can that possibly have worked that easily? Absolutely. I come up here, I do my load, and I forgot to do a refresh. So I forced the screen refresh the hard way. I always forget that last step. I had 15 seconds to spare. I could have typed inkpick.refresh in there. All right, so I got it done in under 60 seconds, right? Wrong. Let's try it over again. Let's change just one little thing. Kerblamo. Huh? Why'd that blow up? Well, that gets into an underlying concern of how the ink API works. Every stroke you draw gets a unique ID attached to it. But to keep it fast, it's not a GUID. It's an incremented integer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it better be unique within any given ink object. So when I drew it, it got 1 assigned to it. When I loaded, there was a stroke in there with 1 assigned to it already. And so it blew up. So what I need to do is modify this just a little bit. First, I have to say ink picture 1 dot ink enabled equals false, because we can't change the ink object while the ink object is having ink collected into it. And now I say that what I want is a new ink equals new ink object. And then I say ink is the thing that loads that. And then I say ink picture 1 dot ink equals that new ink. And now I could say ink picture 1 dot ink enabled equals true. And now I can remember the refresh that I forgot before. Notice how I cleverly stuck all that code in after the 60-second mark. You thought these were designed by accident. All right. Save, load. Now it replaces it. So you have to always have a fresh ink object when you're loading ink in. Now we got away with it the first time because it was essentially a fresh ink object, even though it was already in use. But when you do your loading, you always want to load into a new ink object.
So it saves the ink ID, the object ID with the object itself.
Mm-hmm. And it's just a simple incremented number, so it will not be globally unique in any sense of the form. It's only very, very locally unique.
So if you want to add what you have to what already is in there, you have to do the logic of changing that ID or.
We got that one coming up as the next demo, or I think it's the next demo. If not, it's a couple down the road. Okay. That we load into the temp and copy into the real from there. All right, so again, the load converts to the byte, and we have this gotcha that we have to, it has to be a new ink object. There we go. We're going to do the saving some ink, and then we'll do the loading some ink, and then we'll see our examples there. All right, so let's do the saving some ink. So we'll call this one save some. What am I doing wrong here? Save some. And so now I want to just make part of the ink get saved. So I say ink picture 1 dot ink dot extract strokes. And I want to extract strokes from a rectangle with some extraction flags. So I'll say we'll make a new rectangle. Now, since we saw before how small 1,000 was, we'll go for a 10,000 rectangle. And we're going to put that into a new ink object. Is going to be those extracted strokes. And then I'm going to steal code, come down here. Still not going to make my 60 seconds.
Slow.
See? But I got close. And now I do my write all bytes again, tell it to run. I draw a bunch of stuff, bunch of stuff. I do my save some. Notice how it did the extract. It took chunks out. We'll go back and we'll fix that so it doesn't take the chunk out. In the meantime, let's now go back and do our load, since we saved into the same file name. There comes out the stuff that I saved. When I did that extract, because I was in a hurry, I took the default implementation of extract. They have an additional parameter I can do, which is extract flags, with the option being remove from original or copy from original. Obviously, a lot of times you want copy. This certainly would be one of them where I want copy. So now, I draw my stuff. Now, when I do my save sum, there it is. And then I do my load, and that was the subset that was in that rectangle. So, the extract strokes lets you pull some number of strokes into an ink object. There's another overload, which is, give me all of them. I don't want some subset, I want all of them. So now, it's a new ink object, whole new serial numbers, restarting from 1 and everything. And we, again, have the control of how we extract them. So obviously, our next demo has to be 60 seconds to loading some ink. So, come back to my form, start up my clock. Over here, load some, and come over here, steal as much of this code as I can steal. And the difference is, instead of now saying inkpicture1.ink equals that ink, I do add strokes at rectangle, and the strokes that I add will be ink.strokes. And the rectangle will be a new rectangle starting at 10,000, 10,000, and going to 20,000, 40,000. Why 40,000? Because I want to demonstrate that it does support stretching and scaling when you do this. And so now, I come down here, stop. I'm done, I tell you, I'm done, I'm done. Assuming, of course, the code compiles. 4,000? Okay, it'll still give me the skew effect that I was after. All right, so now I go and draw some stuff that's an existing drawing. I come down here and I do my load sum. Okay, I definitely had 40,000. It stretched that way out there. So that's how we do that without having to go manually change those stroke IDs. We just load them into a temp and copy them into the one we want them in. Much, much simpler.
When you take that out, does it preserve the stroke ID?
It's preserving the stroke ID and all of the points and all of the characteristics that describe it. It's an absolute preservation of everything that it knows about that stroke.
And a stroke doesn't have to be all continuous.
Yes, it is.
It does.
If you stop drawing, you've started a new stroke.
If you go outside a rectangle and come back in, like did like a kind of horseshoe, and then save that rectangle.
I think that's 2 stroke objects, but I'm not positive.
Load it back in, it's 2.
I'm pretty sure it's 2. But I'd have to run a test on that. It'd be easy to do, but not in 60 seconds. But I think it's 2. All right.
What defines the end of the stroke? Is it
Where the pen picks up.
so if you stop and they continue on, that's not enough? That's a continuation.
Right. It may very well show up as a cusp in that stroke, depending on what direction you continue on. Cusps are one of the advanced shape geometry things to help say, these are points where we had some sort of inflection in the drawing. All right. So we did our loading some ink. Now we want to do the exporting ink, those other formats. Okay. No way. How will I get this one done in 60 seconds? But I think it's cool enough that it's worth getting laughed at. All right, so I'm going to export. All right, so to do this, first I need to make a graphics object using, sorry for those of you who don't know GDI+, but there's no way I'm going to make 60 seconds, but if I'm going to get close, I have to do this just as fast as I can. So we create a graphics. So that creates a graphics that's compatible, has the right bitmap depth and everything. And then I say, all right, using bitmap BMP. Oh, sure, just pop up and tell me I have a printer when I'm trying to get work done. New bitmap, which has to be compatible with, that's the one I want. So I'm going to make that be inkpicture1.width, comma inkpicture1.height. Told you I wasn't going to come even close. But it's just too cool not to do. And compatible with that graphics object. And then I say inkpicture1.renderer.draw onto that graphics object, inkpicture1.strokes, which is the collection of inkpicture1.ink.strokes. It's the collection of stroke objects. And then I say bmp.save, and we will save this to @C:/AAD&D.bmp, and image format, and it's saying, hey, I don't know that, so I need a using on there. Thought I had all the usings I needed done already. So we'll save this one as a BMP, and we run. And so I draw a big happy face, and I go up here, and I export, and I come over here, and there's my AAD&D.bitmap, and I blew it. Always blow it. Always blow it. You'd think after all these times I'd remember. I do remember actually, but not often enough. That bitmap they created is filled with black, and then I drew black on top of it. So before I can do the ink picture render, I have to say that I want to fill in that bitmap with a white brush or some sort of color brush. I'll do it the color of the control. So to do that, I need another graphics object. I told you I was going to get way more into GDI than I wanted to. Was the graphics object of the bitmap from the bitmap, or from image. BMP, and using brush BRSH equals new solid brush based on inkpicture1.backcolor. And now I want to say gbmp.fill rectangle, and I will use brush and inkpicture1.client rectangle. All right. That time, we should come back over here. Didn't I just fill that in?
Maybe it was the happy face.
All right, instead of going back color, we'll go color.white. Export. Make sure that in fact it has changed. 6:45. Yep, that's the right time. All right.
You did the 4 colors be white, so I guess nothing would be drawn on that.
But after I did the white, I did the renderer onto it. All right, something I'm missing there. It's really about that much code. There's just something I'm missing. I'll have to correct that at some point, but we need to keep going on more demos. It's basically the renderer says, if you've got a graphics surface, whether it's for a printer or a bitmap or the screen, alternate, not strokes, it will now be pixels on that surface.
So do you get to interact a lot with GDI Plus?
More than I'd like to. I'm getting more familiar with transforms than I ever wanted to be, because darn if people don't want to in real world apps take that ink and rotate it and oh, but that ink's attached to something that's on the screen as pixels. And so now I got to rotate the thing it's attached to. It's like, I didn't want to know this much GDI plus. All right. So that was our exporting ink, which failed miserably. Let's go to one that's not going to fail miserably, which is selecting, moving, and resizing. So I'm going to start up my clock, give myself 2 new menu items. And I'll go over here on the first one, select, and say ink picture 1 dot editing mode equals ink overlay editing mode dot select. I'll come back to this one and steal that code and come up here and say editing mode equals dot ink. Ha! Not even 45 seconds and I'm done. All right, assuming of course it works. I draw some stuff, I come up here, change to select mode, I grab some stuff, I drag it around, I resize it any way I want, and then I come back here and I draw some more stuff. You start to understand why I'm saying you can build pretty powerful tablet apps without having to do a whole lot of work, because Microsoft did the hard part. All right, and that hard part that they did is part of the ink overlay, not that ink collector. I talked about ink overlay was a subclass of ink collector. It adds in a lot of this support for dragging and dropping and selecting and stuff. And so it gives us basically 3 modes we can draw in: ink, select, and delete. Wait a minute, I only showed you 2. I wonder what the next demo is going to be.
So when you select, do you select a complete stroke, or can you select part of a stroke?
You can only select a complete stroke because it's a whole object by itself. If you wanted, you could build apps that would break strokes up into substrokes and select that. But by default, you get one whole stroke or multiple strokes. If you had a bunch of strokes selected, you could move them around as a unit.
So you don't have to select the entire stroke, and then you can select the entire.
It depends on how your selection mechanism is working, and honestly, I don't remember right now, so let's give it a quick shot. All right, go to select. You do have to surround it. On the other hand, you can select by tapping on it. So, and of course, in a more sophisticated application, you might implement another selection mechanism, such as tap inside a shape. And that becomes a way of selecting, so you don't have to exactly hit the stroke, because sometimes you'll miss. Okay, most of the time. All right, so now we're going to do our 60 seconds to erasing. Come back up here, start my clock back up, and we'll call it 2 more menu options: point erase and stroke erase. We're going to come up here on this one, steal more code from up here, say that our editing mode is going to be .delete. But now we need one more thing. We need our erasing mode, eraser mode, to be equal to overlay eraser mode point. Come back up here to this one, add code there, steal the code blatantly from up here. I'll probably still not make my 60 seconds, but boy, I got to be close. If I stop and look, of course, I'll never make it. There, I made it. All right, so now I've just given myself not one, but two erase modes. I go to point erase, and I am breaking a stroke up into substrokes wherever the eraser happens to pass. I go to stroke erase, and I'm deleting any stroke that the eraser touches. Simple, all implemented for you. You just have to decide one small thing, which is how big should your eraser be? Because there's an eraser width property as well. So you'll find that a lot of the applications, such as, for example, Journal, give you multiple eraser sizes for your point erase, and then a stroke erase as one more option. All right. So there's 60 seconds to erasing. Let's talk about drawing attributes now. So we'll do the simplest and most obvious drawing attribute example, which is colored pens. Start up my timer. Go over here. We'll say we want black. And then here, we'll say we want blue. And then we'll go and add a handler for this. And we will say ink picture one dot default drawing attributes dot color equals color dot black. And go handle this one with stolen code. Color dot blue. Not black, blue. Wouldn't be a very impressive demo. Oh, I stopped my clock. I cheated. Oh well. I think I was still inside the 60-second mark pretty easily there. I come and I draw. I change to blue and I draw. I change back to black and I draw some more. Uh-huh. So that default drawing attributes is a set of things that describe the next stroke that's going to be drawn in this ink collector. We've got color. We've got width and height. If you've got a round pen, you only need to set width because height is automatically width. But if you've got a rectangular pen, which is another one of the drawing attributes you can set, you've got then this additional height option. You have got transparency, that you can set the transparency level to be some range between 0 and 255. And so you can have some overlapping transparency with that. You can have pressure sensitivity so that when you draw... Oh, the clock was running. So that when you draw, for example, here, let me go to a custom pen. Customize my pen settings. Okay, it is pressure sensitive now. So if I press really hard, but it's such a small pen you can't really tell. So let's give ourselves a big fat pen and change my pen settings. Okay, it is pressure sensitive. So now if I draw very lightly, you see we get a very, very small stroke. So there's a lot of things we can set in there, but the most important ones are usually going to be your color, your transparency, and so on. For those of you who've done a lot of graphics work, one of the things you can set about it is the raster operator, the ROP2, which will let you do things like have it not just be on the ink, on top of the surface or transparent over the surface, but things like make it a blend of what's there and what's not. Make it a mirror image or an XOR of what's there and what's not. A lot of things you can set in there. And remember, your default drawing attributes is whatever will be part of the next stroke. Meanwhile, every stroke that you draw has part of the data that's attached to it, the drawing attributes that were used in it. And you can go retroactively change the stroke by changing its drawing attributes and redisplaying it. Okay, I would show you the 60 seconds to clipboarding demo, but it's a waste of time. Because if you go to the Microsoft blogs and various knowledge-based sites, you find this, which says, hey, in Visual Studio 2005 Beta 2, the clipboard functions from the Ink API are all failing. And the answer comes back, yeah, there are a few known issues with Microsoft.ink on the .NET Framework 2.0 beta that we're currently working on, one of them being the clipboard APIs don't work, another being some problems with the divider. The date on that note is a year ago, just about today. So they never got the problem worked out before they shipped the .NET framework and the latest version of the API. So we're just now stuck with it, which is sad. Because it was literally a function as simple as clipboard this, much like we did with extract strokes. Clipboard this, and you could take it into other applications like the journal I'm using here and paste it in. Instead, you got to implement it manually. I can show you how to do that, but not in 60 minutes, much less 60 seconds. All right.
If it's that hard, can you just make a memory stream?
You're right down the path I'd have to be taking. Take those bytes, serialize them in the proper format into the memory stream, copy it on there. There's a bunch of steps you have to get right. And it was so easy when they just give me a function called copy to clipboard or paste from clipboard. And they did all that work for me. All right, 60 seconds to simple handwriting recognition. Only I'm going to give you an even faster demo than that. I'm going to give you a 10-second demo. And then I'll give you the 60-second demo. So, start up my clock. Go to my tab 2. No, let's go to tab 3. And text box. Drop that on here. Oh, I already had one on there. It must have been from the last time I ran this. Okay. So I got that one done in 15 seconds. You say, what? What do you mean it's done? Well, it's done. If I come up here, and I've got these text fields, I come up here, notice this little annoying box that keeps popping up. On some tablets, it only pops up when the pen's in range. I love my gateway, but on the gateway, it's always there. If the focus is in a text box, it's there. Get it right, gateway. But if I tap that, up pops what they call the tablet PC input panel. Everywhere except in the code. In the code, they call it the pen input panel. Thank you, Microsoft. Where I can go and write stuff and more. And you see where it's recognizing what I'm writing and giving me suggestions of, is that what you meant over here? And then I can go and click on one of those selections and say, no, I wanted stuff with a capital S. And they said, yeah, that was one of the things I thought it might be. And then I hit the insert button, and there it is. In other words, every Windows Forms application that runs on a tablet PC has already got text input through the text input or tablet PC input panel. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Obviously, it's a good thing in a lot of ways because your apps are already tablet enabled. It's a bad thing because some people will then turn around and sell this fact that their apps are quote-unquote tablet enabled because you can use the pen to put input in. Well, some customers are expecting a little more than that out of their tablet apps.
How would you do about spaces? Suppose you want to add more spaces between two words, which is usually, I think this is the main thing that annoyed me when I was trying to do ink is how would you control space?
Well, there was a space option there on that little input panel that a little button I could tap to give me another space.
Okay. So even if you write it very far off,
It still sees it as one. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So let me modify that demo just a little bit to be a little bit more interesting. And I have to be careful about this because sometimes now this demo is very hard for me to do because it's hard for me to get it to make the mistake I want to show that it doesn't have to make. Because the tablet understands what I'm writing. Now, a lot of people think that this is because it's like voice recognition in PCs today, where you have to train it to your voice. They say, oh, you're training it to your ink. And the tablet team comes back and says, no, it trained you to write better. Over time, you learn to write the way it can read. Because they said, we really, honestly, did not write any training functions in here. In Vista, they'll have them. But they're not in there today. And so, let me go back to my load handler here just a little bit and say that what I want to do now is I want to make a pen input panel, PINP, started out as null, but now come down here and say I'm going to actually make a pen input panel equals a new pen input panel attached to text box 2. And then I'm going to say, hey, pen input panel, your factoid equals factoid.email. And now I'm going to try to write this the same way twice. Realize I might not succeed. I come up here, and I go down here, and I say Martin at tabletuml.com. And darn it, I've gotten too good, so it recognizes it. Even when very often the earlier times I'd give this demo, it wouldn't recognize that as an email address because there were too many other alternative interpretations. But now it's just, I've gotten too practiced, I can't make a mistake. So what's actually happening down here, watch it make a mistake now. What's actually happening down here is that factoid that I gave it is a hint to say, here's the sort of thing I think is going to be written in there. And so by creating, because the pen input panel was always there, but I created one manually and attached it to the control to say, I expect you're going to see this. And it let me just nudge the recognizer. Now, if I didn't put any @ signs in there, it's not going to put any @ signs in there. It's not going to force it to be what you told it, but it's going to suggest. All right.
You should put like a date factoid type of thing.
Here, in fact, is our list of factoids. We've got a bunch of ones for various kinds of generally Eastern alphabets that are much more handwriting oriented, and they want to say, here's what we think it's going to come in. So we've got our language or alphabet factoids. Then we've got our numeric factoids, single digit or number simple, so it's not looking for as many things, it's not looking for commas necessarily and so on. We've got percents and currencies. Character factoids. They have this one for lowercase character, but it's not supported yet. I don't know when it will be. But a single character or a punctuation or an upper character. And finally, yes, date, email, file name, web address, postal code, system dictionary. System dictionary says look it up in the word list in the dictionary, which is what it does already, so I'm not sure of benefit there. Telephone and time. Word list is a factoid which we can't use on the pen input panel. We'll use it in advanced text recognition. The word list says, here is a list of words that I think you're going to see. So it lets you be very, very precise in a particular environment. But the pen input panel can't use that for obscure reasons of when you have to create that word list happens before you get a chance to attach a factoid to the pen input panel. When you're doing manual recognition, you get a chance to create a word list and attach it. But you can't attach it here on the pen input panel. So I've covered most of the basics, dates, times, files, and so on. And the word list, except for on the pen input panel, lets you cover just about anything else. All right. I would do the demo of the 60 seconds off Francais, except for one thing, my French is atrocious, and I'm not in Montreal like I was the first time I gave this, where I felt it was only polite if I was going to be up in their country, in their city, I ought to at least make some accommodation for the francophobes in the audience. Francophones, not francophobes. That's a little bit of a... So, but the important thing about this is it only works if you download the recognizer pack for additional languages, and here's the address for it. It covers most of your basic European languages. They're adding new ones on as they go along, but it's a long process because it's got to be trained with an AI and stuff. So the recognizer packs are coming out slowly.
How hard is it to make one?
I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, I kind of know where to start, but it's so ugly that whenever I look at that as to say, here's an application that would require building a custom recognizer. Okay, I'm going to go do that application instead. All of a sudden, you're not in the realm of .NET. You're deep, deep in the realm of obscure com stuff. So, all right.
So I guess your applications are not localizable.
Only so much as the languages they've supported. All right. Now let's do a little bit more advanced handwriting recognition. So, let's start this up. come over here to my toolbox. Let me guess, the pizza is about to lose me my audience.
Still have 60 seconds.
All right. And in fact, I did this one in about 15 seconds.
You're done?
I am done. I come over here and I write stuff in here.
Okay, so you made it.
And it sees stuff. They call it the ink edit control, much like the ink picture, where they just took a collector and attached it to an existing control. They took the text box and attached a collector to it with a little bit of clever background recognition going on and said, okay, we'll let you, if you want to modify your application where they can write directly into the text box, you can. I'm still able to type stuff in here, but now I can write stuff as well. So, not even 60 seconds on that one. 15 seconds tops.
You want to take a break?
All right, I can take a break.
And you're welcome to get pizza. You're the first. You're the speaker.
I never eat while I'm speaking.
Okay.
It'll just interrupt me. All right, go feed yourselves. When we come back, do you want me to finish this one up and then go to the next one, or go straight to the next one? Because we've got basically...
Feel free.
Okay.
You think this has been a pretty good one.
Okay, this is I think the more entertaining one because of how much you can do so quickly. The next one is, okay, now let's build something complicated. So this is a good groundwork for the next one.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, in every little segment, I mean, I've been able to walk away, deal with something else, come back, and I can pick right up.
Martin, what are some of the business cases to where you would use a tablet to draw like that?
That's kind of the point of my next talk is I think it's any situation where you would communicate graphically as opposed to textually. I think there's a real justification for the tablet then. And I think that's a lot of cases. I think there's a lot of people who draw pictures as part of their work and hand you a picture and say, do that work. Well, now I draw the picture and I can still hand it to you and say, do that work, but the machine has understood what I told you to draw. And that's the next talk, is I show a sample engine for building that sort of application to let you go, and the sample is you're doing wiring plans for a building. And as you draw shapes, it's saying, oh, well, that's conduit, this is an outlet, this is a junction box, and it's building a quote as you go and everything. So I'm drawing the work order of what I want the crew to do, and the computer's building the work order that's going to get sent to the customer. And to me, that's just an incredibly exciting thing. Now, obviously, I've got a bias, because I've just described my Tablet UML tool. Tablet UML is that for software design. But I didn't write it because I wanted to make lots of money on the tool. I wrote it because I thought, this is the way I want to do my UML design. I draw, it understands.
You mean as a UML, you mean like a modeling language UML?
Yep. All right. Let's take advantage of the fact that I'm not eating and give you a quick example. Draw use cases. Draw another actor. Come down here. There's a class. It's just the way I want to draw these things in a meeting with a customer. I don't want to have to go do the CAD-like draggy, droppy, clicky stuff. I want to come over here and say that, well, this is the author, and this is the editor, and this is the book. And then later on, when I get a chance, I hit the update button, and that, to me, is the real business case. Things where people draw pictures as part of their work or mark up pictures. Take a photograph and add some notes on it of what was in the photo. So if I go back to my unfortunate incident here, an insurance adjuster could come in here and mark up that photo with what she saw and why she thinks it's such and such amount of damage and so on. It's ink that shows up as a layer on top of the photo. So the photo itself is still preserved, but it gives her a way to attach annotations to it in a very natural pen-based approach. Another business case is less obvious, but I think it may potentially, not like I've done market research, it may potentially be a more valuable one is we geeks tend to forget something. The keyboard is not natural. We all use the keyboard as if it's not even there. It's just our thoughts going into the code. A lot of other people, they have to still struggle and learn to use these things. I've known professional engineers out in the field who still are doing the sort of stuff, and if you just let them write it, they'd be happier. Because I'm clearly a lot faster typing than I am writing, but they aren't. So I think there's some justification there that's a little bit less of a business case than an individual case. Some individuals will see real benefit there. All right. Bambi is a mean bitch.
Is it actually your car, and that's actually...
That's Tuesday night.
So it looks like Bambi ran into you.
Yeah, Bambi came darting out, and I swerved and just clipped Bambi. I mean, to me, that looks minor. I don't know what it's like on this side of the state. I know you get deer collisions over there. The west side of the state, it's so common that I just looked at this and it's like, oh, I hit another one. Because that makes 5 for me, and I do not hold the record in my family. My brother-in-law's got 6. I looked at it and said, oh, that's minor. The insurance adjuster looks at it and says, well, that's $2,700 before I open the hood, because if I open the hood, we won't be able to close it and you can't drive it home. So I'm not happy with Bambi tonight. I won't be happy with Bambi for a while. I just felt like, past collisions, it's bad. Oh, no, it's right in front of me, smash. This one was swerve, clip, swerve back, pull over, stop the car, everything nice and calm. I'm thinking it can't be much damage. So they actually had some early pilot work with insurance claims adjusters working with this. My insurance agency, Allstate, got to give them credit for this. They keep their costs down because they never invest in technology unless they absolutely have to. Okay, maybe that's not keeping their costs down, but they don't have anything close to this. She was the clipboard and the yellow legal pad and the scribbling. It's like, no, you take the picture, you mark stuff on it. Apparently, there are standard symbols that represent, in the insurance industry, a circle is a crack or a ding or something like this. And they've got these standard symbology, and it's just itching to be a tablet application where they draw the symbols and it says, oh, okay, I see what that is, and I'll make a recording of that in that location and so on. Yeah. All right, I'm ready to keep going.
Are you ready to keep going? We were just going to do the people looking for jobs.
Oh, okay.
Is there anybody looking for jobs? Any jobs looking for people? Okay. Martin, it's up to you.
All right.
Our website, if you become disenchanted with your current job, our website, I have contracting companies contacting me all the time and putting their information out there. So if you need to find a job for somebody else or you're looking for a job, that's a good place to start. And if you have any questions about all those people, are generally pretty friendly to find their contact information out there. So.
And one more pitch for dues. If you have a checkbook, make it up AAPME, otherwise you pay cash. And $20.
Okay. Let's do one more quick bit of handwriting recognition as our next demo, and then we'll jump on to another topic. So, come back over here, start my clock, give myself another button, and I'm going to, when that button is clicked, I'm going to do handwriting recognition on whatever was written on the big button. And I'm a .NET programmer. So how do I turn anything into a string? Of course, I use toString. InkPicture1 dots ink dot strokes dot toString. And stop my clock, and I'm off and running. thought I was, oh, I keep forgetting every time I stop the clock, Visual Studio loses focus, and I hit the F5 key and nothing happens. All right, so now I come over here, and I write hello, and I push that button. Fine, make a liar out of me.
I'm just going to ask what you...
What's that? Oh, come on. What if what I do doesn't translate well?
No, what if you draw a smiley face or something?
It's going to do its best.
Okay.
Build, rebuild. Come on. Oh, wait. I'll just do it the simple way. I was trying to be clever.
Are you giving it the owner?
Yeah, and I probably did that syntax wrong.
Yeah.
Hello. Oh, come on. This is the simplest demo. This is like demo 0 practically.
Well, it depends. Did you pay your dues to the
Oh,
presentation goddess?
I'm trying to read it out of the ink picture 1, not out of the collector. Thank you. Collector. There we go. I was thinking on the picture because all the rest of my demos use the picture. All right. Hello. Hello.
Did you draw a smiley face?
I will draw the smiley face. And boy, it will be ugly. It will try. Or. It's not saying it's a good match. The toString simply says, out of the universe of possible matches, here's the one that looks best. That doesn't tell you how good it looks, just that this is the best one. When you do recognition with text or with gestures, which we'll see coming up, or with voice, which we can't begin to cover in 60 seconds, but when you do any of these, they always have a strength of or a confidence of the recognition, from good to medium to poor, or some other sort of verbiage along that way. I would bet you if we looked under the hood, that was an incredibly poor recognition, but the toString is brute force. It says, give me an answer. And if the answer you get is lousy, well, that's what you get with brute force.
Now, just a quick question. The recognizer, it just recognizes the alphabet. Right?
It recognizes whatever recognizer you have installed, which by default is the English language, but it recognizes by words, not just by letters.
No, okay, what I'm trying to say is in the alphabet there are, or actually in the symbol page, there are some characters that have symbols, like accents and stuff, and sometimes they are, like, they have a face as one of the characters that, based on the font.
Usually it's not going to recognize those.
Okay.
But if they were accented characters for French, for example, and you had the French recognizer in, then it would have better luck recognizing those. All right. Again, this is a very limited approach, but boy, it's the easy one to demonstrate as long as you remember where you're getting your ink from, which I wasn't. Because I can literally, and I've done this for a lot of audiences, go up and inside of the first 30 seconds of the talk, I'm writing text and hitting a button and it's showing me what I wrote. And all of a sudden people realize maybe this isn't hard stuff after all. Now, we're not going to do the French. We are going to talk a little bit about the custom recognition. I want to mention it. What's going on behind the scenes of that toString is all real recognition. Where you create, first of all, you have to create a recognizers collection. There's all sorts of arbitrary stuff going on in the COM mechanism because the API is really COM. It's not .NET. It's just got a very friendly .NET wrapper around it. Well, if you've worked with COM at all, you know that sometimes you've got these lists of things you can register to say, these are all things providing the same interface, but they're different versions. So the recognizers collection says, give me all the things that are implementing the recognition interface. And then you say, out of that recognizers collection, give me one of the recognizers. And you'll usually want the first one, the default that the user has installed. And now you've got a recognizer which knows how to recognize words. Now you have to make a recognition context, which specifies this is the sort of things I'm testing for, the sort of words I'm looking for, and so on. And then you say, okay, that recognition context is based on that recognizer, and that does the real work. And when it does that work, what it then comes up with is it comes up with sort of what they call the top alternate. But then underneath the top alternate it says, oh, I could have actually seen this or this or this, but then those alternates are further broken down into sub-pieces. So in fact, this is what's going on behind the scenes when I pop this up, and I go and write stuff and more. They are really recognizing that as all one text, stuff and more. But then at a lower level of recognition, they're recognizing it as 3 different words. And then each of those 3 different words, they're recognizing potential alternates for that as well. So if you want something that's a lot smarter than toString, it's all available for you. And it used to be something that you'd really, really have to dig into because toString is just not right that often. It's cool to show it off that quickly, but it's not right that often. But now that they've gone and given us this tablet input panel, you know, that's what you need for probably 80+% of the apps out there, that it's just going to do the recognition for you. They've built a standard mechanism that your users all know how to use because it's what they're using in all their other tablet apps. So you don't do as much custom recognition work today as I think you did earlier in the tablet. All right. Our next one, 60 seconds to text to speech. We're going to come up here. I'm going to have to add a using. Oh, start my clock. Using Microsoft dot. Oh no. There we go. Using SpeechLib. I was using the wrong one. I'm going to come down here and say that what I want is I want to make a voice, ISP voice, equals a new SP voice class. And I come down here, and instead of saying messagebox.show, I'm going to say voice, get the syntax right, voice.speak. That toString. Except I need a couple of other parameters. I need some flags. One is the flag that means make it asynchronous speech. And I need to have a stream number, which has to be an unsigned int.
Can you get any slower?
Yes, I could get any slower, but I'm not doing too bad. SN equals 0. And I build that. And SP voice class. And now, try this again.
Hello.
Instead of the message box, now it's saying it. So the text-to-speech is literally that easy. And so for those of you who weren't here for the Grok Talks last month, you just saw what I then had to turn around and stretch into a 10-minute talk. Was that 30 seconds or less of code? Well, okay, so it was 60 seconds. I had to somehow stretch that into a 10-minute talk because it's really that easy. Now to go the other way is more than we could cover in the rest of today and tomorrow. The voice command is a very complicated thing, partly because it's the worst API Microsoft has ever published. Absolutely the worst API they have ever published, bar none. I wish the people who had written that had learned a lesson from the people who wrote this Ink API, which is so incredibly powerful. You've seen all the stuff I've done, and how that, in my opinion, is the best API Microsoft has ever published. Small problem with that, it's the same team. They wrote the speech API much earlier, and they wrote it really before .NET was coming along, and they wrote it as a COM API, but they weren't good COM programmers. They were good voice programmers. It's a great voice command API. They were lousy COM programmers. So, if you are a C++ programmer using their COM API, It's a powerful API. If you're a VB programmer or a .NET programmer, it's a lousy API because they do things like pass around pointers to interfaces cast as longs. Well, guess what that comes across in with a .NET interop? Of course, it comes across as a long. And there is just no simple way to convert that back to the right interface. What I eventually had to do for voice command was to say, I'm going to build a helper com object that I pass it longs, and it does the conversion back to the right interface and passes them back to me. And boy, I hope I'm passing it the right stuff, or all sorts of stuff is going to blow up. There's another place. When I did that text-to-speech there, I got the default voice. Well, you can install other voices on your machine, and then they give you sample code for how you can call the API to walk through and pick the voice you're interested in. And all you have to do in this supposed COM library is you just have to call this inline C++ function to walk the list. What sort of a COM application is it that you're calling inline C++? Could you do any more to scream VB not permitted here? Not much less .NET not permitted here. So I think they did a great job on the tablet API because I think they learned a lot from what they didn't get right on the speech API. It's a great API. It's not a fun API to use. One other reason why I don't show the voice command API much these days is I hear very strong promises that in Vista they will have a new version of SAPI, SAPI 7. They skipped 6 entirely. SAPI 7 will be entirely .NET wrapped, so you just don't have to deal with these issues anymore. So I can show you how to do it, but it would hurt me, it would hurt you, all for no benefit, because by the time you could get a voice command application up and running, Microsoft will finally ship Vista. That's not because they're that fast on Vista, it's because it's that slow and painful to get the voice command app up and running. Yeah?
So all the underlying technology is written in COM.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because that's when they started, or because .NET is probably too slow?
Yes. Never ask me A or B. I'll always answer C or yes. Part of it's because that's when they started. Part of it's because I love .NET. I love Microsoft. Sometimes I hate both of them. In this particular case, there are a lot of groups at Microsoft who are trying to squeeze out the last ounce of performance on stuff or whatever other reason, or they want to be compatible with older technologies. As much as they want us to learn .NET, it seems like all of their cool new stuff goes through the COM phase first. And that's definitely the case with the speech API and really with the tablet API. Under the hood, it's all COM. But the wrapper they put around it was such a beautiful wrapper that you almost never have to know it. Almost never. We'll see in the second part of the talk an example where you have to kind of know that you're COM under the hood. All right. I can't do the text-to-speech or the speech recognition, either one in French, because you need a French text-to-speech engine, and Microsoft doesn't ship one. However, SAPI is supposed to be a standard that's supported by many different text-to-speech engines and so on. So I believe there are some out there, but you don't have one available for download like you have for the ink recognition. All right, quick example of gestures. And I think that will be, yeah, that'll get us through and we'll be ready to look at our second talk. So quick example of gestures. I talked about gestures before. Start up my clock. Go back over here. Go back to my demo. And go to my event handler. Here's my gesture event. And whatever the gesture is, I'm going to speak it because I now can. So I'm going to come up here, steal this code, come down here, and instead of doing the ink.strokes, all that stuff to string, I am going to do e.gestures sub0.id.toString. All right. So, assuming that code runs, I come up here, and I go and draw some stuff, and nothing happens. Because yes, I got it done in 60 seconds, but I didn't do some setup work which is probably the most frustrating thing, is you'll see there's a gesture event there, so you think I can respond to gestures. Yes, but for performance reasons, they don't have the gestures enabled by default. You have to tell it the ones you're interested in. So, to keep life simple, I'm going to come up here and say, I'm interested in all of them. Ink picture 1 dot set gesture status, application gesture dot all true. They just wanted to make it so they don't have to do as much checking if you're not looking for a lot of gestures. They wanted it for performance reasons. So now, I come over here. Oh, sure, make a liar out of me. Make a liar out of me. What am I doing wrong in here? Am I never... debug. Breakpoint. I'm never getting there. What did I miss? What did I miss? Did I put it in the wrong one? Set gesture status. All gestures true. Did I not? Oh. Duh. What do you want to bet? I forgot to set my collection mode. Collection mode is set to ink only. I want it to be ink and gesture. So, I had the code right there except for the setting. There's my... This Camtasia software is really cool for this recording, but it steals the F9 key to say start, pause, and restart the recording. I, of course, living in the debugger, think the F9 means turn the breakpoint on and off.
Circled.
There we go.
Circled. Square. Right. Left. Right, left. Up, down. Arrow up. The gesture.
Okay, that one said no gesture because I chose the most confident one, and they said, well, I don't think that's really a gesture. It might be.
The gesture. Tap. Check. Tap. The gesture. Check.
So sometimes the most confident thing they see is, I don't think that was a gesture. And you actually have to walk the gestures list to find something else. But basically, they're just firing an event saying, here's the things I thought that gesture might have been. And then it's up to you to decide how you respond to them. That'll be a major part of the next talk. Yes?
It's interesting. Physics Illustrator uses a check mark to turn an object into a fixed object. And I noticed that it had trouble recognizing it.
Check.
That you probably draw a lot like
Check.
me, that you...
Check.
Now, of course, I can't get it to not recognize. But I think their check marks are
Check.
supposed to be a little tiny vertical and a big diagonal or something like that. So, all right. So that's the gesture side. Basically, they respond to these gestures, fire off an event when you put it into gesture mode. They've given us a bunch of system gestures, which are basically pen stuff translated into mouse stuff. So your taps, your double taps, your drags and drops, and so on. But then they've given us these application gestures. We've got our lines and our double lines, our elbows, so we can go right down, right up, and so on. We've got arrows, curlicues, circles, semicircles, chevrons, a bunch of others. They also have support for what they call multi-stroke gestures. And it's, I guess, cool for some people. It drives me nuts. Let me go change that collection mode to be gesture only, because you only support multi-stroke gestures in gesture only mode. So I was used to, I drew the check, it said check. Now,
Down.
Also, it's weights.
Down.
and that's how they support.
Exclamation.
which is great if you happen to have a need for multi-stroke gestures. The one that I usually draw like this, the arrow,
Arrow up.
boy, for a lot of people, this makes a lot more sense.
In the gesture.
Except I missed it.
Arrow up.
For a lot of people, that just makes more sense. I can't stand that time lag. I want to respond now. To me, it feels like I'm stopping and waiting for the tool. I do something, I wait. I do something, I wait. So you will see in my tablet UML tool, no multi-stroke gestures. I wasn't going to support that wait. But they've given support for it if it makes sense for your applications. All right, we'll skip this 60 seconds of great tablet PC applications, and let's get into our next talk. But any last questions before we jump into the next one? All right,